SystoLOCK, the future of passwordless multi-factor authentication. A deep dive by Google's Gemini.
You know, everyone struggles with passwords, right? I mean, they're supposed to protect our stuff, but let's be honest, nobody wants to deal with them. And it's crazy, but even when we do manage to remember them, there's still a security nightmare.
That's true.
So the craziest thing I've been hearing about is this whole movement to get rid of passwords entirely.
Yeah.
Which is wild. So that's what we're diving into today, this whole world of passwordless authentication, specifically how it works in those good old Windows domains.
Right.
And get this, there's this system called SystoLOCK that's been turning heads.
Yeah, SystoLOCK is really interesting because it's like, okay, we hear you passwords are a problem.
Right.
But the way they go about fixing it is pretty unique. Like, a lot of security relies on the cloud these days.
True.
But SystoLOCK is like, nope, we're staying right here on your system. It's completely self-hosted.
So for businesses that are all about data privacy, or maybe they just want to be in total control, this is right up their alley.
Exactly. And that's a big deal because when you look at traditional MFA in Windows, it often relies on Azure Active Directory.
Oh, yeah.
Or it still uses passwords as a starting point.
Right.
SystoLOCK is like, hold my drink. It's like having this totally independent security guard that lives right on your system, no cloud needed. And here's the kicker. It covers all the bases, like logging in, accessing shared files of the network, even RDP and VPN access, all without passwords. It's really unique in that way.
Okay. I'm officially intrigued. But I gotta ask, how can you have that classic something you know and something you have security without passwords?
Right.
Sounds like some serious security wizardry is going on here.
But think of it this way. SystoLOCK actually creates a separate set of credentials for each user, right? But instead of being attached to their Active Directory object like a password, these credentials are more like, I don't know, a hidden keycard. So when you go to log in, SystoLOCK checks that keycard. And if everything's legit, it issues you a temporary single-use pass. Think of it as that pass getting you through the first door, right? Then you can go through to the domain controller for the final authentication.
Oh, so it's like a super exclusive single entry pass, like it self-destructs the second you've used it.
Exactly.
That's pretty cool. But it sounds like we're just talking about that very first login. What about all the other times you need to prove it's you once you're inside the system?
So that's the great thing about SystoLOCK. It doesn't just stop at the front door.
Okay.
It's got your back for all those other times you need to verify who you are. You need to access something on the network. Bam. SystoLOCK is there.
Oh, wow.
You need to do some user impersonation. No problem. You need to use your admin privileges. SystoLOCK says go for it.
It's like having that digital bodyguard who sticks with you even after you've gone through the initial security checkpoint.
Yeah.
I mean, especially with all the data breaches we've been hearing about lately.
Yeah, it's a big deal.
This has got to be music to the ears of anyone dealing with, like, super strict compliance rules, right?
Absolutely. And since we're on the topic of things that can be security headaches, let's talk about RDP. You know, that thing you use to access your computer remotely?
Right.
It doesn't exactly have the best track record when it comes to security, does it?
Don't even get me started on RDP. I've had my fair share of struggles trying to make that thing secure.
It's a pain, right.
It really is.
But this is where SystoLOCK really shines. Remember that annoying two-step process you usually have to go through with traditional MFA for RDP?
Yes.
You log in with a password, then you get hit with another authentication screen. So make up your mind. Well, SystoLOCK says goodbye to that whole song and dance. It streamlines the whole experience, which is great for users, obviously, but it's also a huge win for security because one of the biggest worries with traditional RDP is someone getting hold of your credentials. SystoLOCK pretty much eliminates that risk.
Now that you mention it, that makes a lot of sense. Anything that means less typing in those super secret passwords over and over again is a win in my book.
And remember those short-lived certificates we were talking about?
Yeah.
Those things are basically like hitting a self-destruct button on your RDP session. Even if someone manages to snag that certificate, it's useless within minutes.
Okay, so this is all sounding pretty amazing, but what about those times when you're offline?
Right.
Like, picture this. You're at some remote cabin in the woods. The internet is, well, let's just say it's not great.
Right.
What happens then?
So this is where things get really clever. You know how your smartphone is usually something you have in those two-factor setups?
Right, yeah.
SystoLOCK uses your smartphone in a really smart way when you're offline.
Okay, now I need to know more.
Let's say you're offline. You need to log in, but obviously your computer can't reach the SystoLOCK server because, well, no internet.
Right.
So what does SystoLOCK do? It actually uses your smartphone as backup.
Whoa.
So your computer will display a QR code, you scan it with your SystoLOCK app, and just like that, your phone becomes this secure link.
Oh, that's really cool. So my phone is like a secret agent sneaking in the authentication codes when the main connection is down.
Exactly. And get this, if the SystoLOCK server is totally off the grid, your phone can even handle the entire verification process on its own, as long as that option has been set up in advance.
So even in a worst case scenario, you're not completely dead in the water. That's a relief. Okay, but what about VPNs? Those things are notorious for adding extra security steps.
Oh, for sure. But SystoLOCK is ready for that too. It actually works with the most popular VPN clients you'd expect, like the one built into Windows and Cisco AnyConnect. As long as your VPN gateway is cool with Active Directory certificate authentication, it'll work. And if your company uses some other more exotic VPN, there's actually a generic plugin for radio servers, which covers a lot of ground.
So no matter what VPN you're using, there's a way to make it work with SystoLOCK.
Exactly.
Okay, they really have thought of everything. Which makes me wonder, with all this talk about how SystoLOCK is the super secure system,
Right.
what's wrong with just doing the whole, like, add an extra step to your login thing?
Right.
You know, regular two-factor authentication isn't that good enough.
That's a great question, right? Because you would think that extra step is enough.
Right.
And honestly, two-factor authentication, or 2FA as the cool kids call it, it's definitely a step in the right direction. The problem is it's often implemented as two-step authentication, which is not quite the same thing, and that little difference makes a big difference.
Okay, so you're going to have to break this down for me like I'm 5.
Okay.
What's the difference, and why does it matter so much?
Okay. Imagine your front door.
Okay.
Two-step authentication is like adding a deadbolt to that door. It's definitely more secure than just a regular doorknob, right?
Right.
But if someone gets past that deadbolt, they're in.
Oh, no.
True two-factor authentication, on the other hand, it's like having a security guard check your ID every single time you want to enter a room in your house. And here's the other thing. With just two-step, people tend to choose weaker passwords because they figure, hey, I've got that extra step, it's fine.
Oh, yeah.
But that's like locking your deadbolt and leaving a window wide open.
Right.
And to make matters worse, most devices on a network, they're not set up with MFA at all.
Oh, true.
So they're sitting ducks, and then you've got those RDP vulnerabilities we were talking about.
Right.
Two-step authentication often doesn't do enough to protect those either.
So it's not the be-all and end-all it's sometimes made out to be.
No.
There are still gaps, and those gaps can have some pretty serious consequences.
Exactly. And all of that is before we even get into MFA fatigue.
MFA fatigue. Okay, hold on. Are you just using big words to sound smart now?
No, it's a real thing.
Okay.
It's when people get so used to seeing those two-factor prompts that they just start ignoring them.
Oh.
You just click through without thinking, which obviously defeats the purpose.
Oh, yeah. I've totally done that.
Right.
I'm so used to seeing those second-factor prompts that sometimes I just click, okay, without even thinking about it.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And then there are the more malicious attacks, like MFA bombing,
Oh, no.
where attackers basically flood you with push notifications hoping you'll just accidentally approve one of them.
Oh, that's scary.
It is. And that big Uber hack a while back, that's a perfect example of how weaknesses in traditional MFA can be exploited. SystoLOCK's approach is designed to completely prevent that kind of thing.
Okay, well, SystoLOCK is sounding better by the minute. But with all this talk about how amazing it is, there's got to be more to it, right? It can't just be about Windows logins and RDP.
No, SystoLOCK is not a one-trick pony.
Okay, good.
It can actually integrate with other systems, too.
Yeah.
Like, for instance, it can work with ADFS, which means you can have seamless, passwordless access to Office 365.
So even those essential work tools are covered.
Exactly.
Nice.
And it can also work with RD Gateway and RD Web 2 for single sign-on to a whole bunch of different applications.
So we're talking serious adaptability here. Like it can fit into a ton of different work environments.
Exactly. And let's not forget about their dedicated mobile authenticator app, SystoLOCK Companion.
Okay.
It's a really powerful tool and can actually replace all those other authenticator apps you probably have cluttering up your phone right now.
So what you're saying is SystoLOCK is basically built for how people actually work today. Flexible, multi-device, with security baked in at every level. That makes a lot of sense. But before I go any further, I gotta ask, with all this talk about what makes SystoLOCK special, what about the cost? Is it gonna cost businesses an arm and a leg to implement this kind of system?
That's always an important consideration.
Right.
But the good news is that SystoLOCK's pricing typically sits somewhere between $2 and $3 per user each month.
Okay.
And they do have discounts depending on the size of the organization and what they need.
So it's not free, obviously.
Right.
But it's not prohibitively expensive either, especially when you consider what you might save by preventing security breaches in the long run, right?
Exactly.
And just think, no more resetting passwords for dozens of users. That alone is worth its weight in gold, let me tell you.
Right.
Okay, we've covered a ton of ground here, and I think it's safe to say that SystoLOCK is a pretty incredible system.
It's impressive.
But before we get too carried away singing its praises, I think it's important to zoom out for a second.
Okay.
What does all of this actually mean in the big picture?
That's the million-dollar question, isn't it? But I think it's safe to say that SystoLOCK is a major step towards a truly passwordless future. And not just passwordless, but one that's more secure and more convenient.
So we're talking about a world where those annoying reset your password emails are a thing of the past.
Gone.
No more juggling dozens of different logins.
Exactly.
And maybe even more importantly, a world where those cyber attacks that rely on weak or stolen passwords are way harder to pull off. Sign me up. That's a future I can definitely get behind. But as with any new technology, getting people to actually use it takes time.
Oh, for sure.
We've talked about the challenges of getting people to use new security tools, but what about the users themselves? How do they fit into this whole passwordless future we keep hearing about?
It's a great question and a really important one. Because at the end of the day, technology is only as good as the people using it. But the good news is, I think this whole shift to a passwordless world is actually going to make things a lot easier for users.
How so?
Well, for one, think about it. No more memorizing those crazy, complicated passwords.
Oh, thank goodness.
No more dealing with those endless password reset emails clogging up your inbox.
It almost sounds too good to be true.
But seriously, I think once we remove the burden of passwords, people are actually going to be more likely to practice good security habits.
Okay, that's interesting.
They're not going to be as tempted to use those weak, easy-to-guess passwords. Or even worse, use the same password for multiple accounts.
Right.
And with that worry out of the picture, people can focus on what matters. Getting their work done, browsing the web, connecting with others, all without the headache of password management.
It's about giving people the freedom to do what they need to do online without having to stress about security.
Exactly. It's about making security seamless.
I love that.
If you had to choose just one thing you want our listeners to take away from today's discussion, what would it be? I'd say the most important takeaway is this. The technology to get rid of passwords, it's already here. And it's way more advanced and user-friendly than people realize. SystoLOCK is the perfect example. It's a powerful and flexible solution that tackles a lot of the problems with passwords and old-school two-factor authentication.
It's like they saw all the headaches we deal with passwords and said, don't worry, we got this. But as we wrap up this deep dive, I want to leave our listeners with something to think about. If you could get everyone in the world to listen to just one piece of advice about staying safe online, what would it be?
That's a good one. I think I'd keep it simple. Be bold, be open to new ideas, and don't be afraid of the future of authentication. It's here, it's designed for you, embrace it.
I love that. Be bold, embrace the future. And on that note, this has been an awesome deep dive into the world of SystoLOCK and passwordless authentication. Hopefully you learned a ton about the future of cybersecurity. Until next time, stay curious, stay safe, and remember, the future is passwordless.